please welcome Chris Love, Head of Marketing Performance at Virgin Media, and Dr. Graziella Castro, Global Head of Marketing Effectiveness at HSBC. Please, a round of applause. Well, guys, thank you very much. And you made it just in time. Graziella has been here for a long time, but in the VIP speakers room, which is a long way from here, and no one told her that in actual fact, you might have to come here. So thank you for making it, and I'm very grateful for it. And Chris, nice to. Rather than me introducing you, perhaps could you introduce yourselves a little bit to the audience and say who you are and why you're here?
Yes, sure. So I'm Dr. Graziella Castro, Global Head of Marketing Effectiveness for HSBC for the past 2 years. Prior, I was Head of Data Analytics at Publicis, and prior to that time, I was at the university teaching statistics. So.
I don't have quite the same level of educational background, but yeah, so I work at Virgin Media O2. I look after marketing performance and Econometrics, which is pretty much marketing effectiveness as you would know it in most businesses. I was at Virgin Media before we merged, and then I got O2 added to the list. So yeah, I'm trying not to feel too imposter syndrome here next to you guys.
I know you'll ease into it. Honestly, soon these conversations come quite naturally. So guys, you've both been using elements of attention data in your practice. What have you been? How have you been using this, and what have you learned in the last few years? Chris, should we start with you?
For us, it's mostly about creative, and even then, it's kind of fairly tangential. From a media point of view, I'm probably a bit embarrassed to be on this stage to say we don't plan to attention. We've spoken about it quite a lot. It's something that the agency often tries to put in front of us and say, hey, let's look at attention planning and unfair share of attention and all those wonderful things. Until now, I'm kind of yet to be convinced by it as a planning approach, and that it's actually materially better than what we currently do. But you guys are here to tell me I'm certainly wrong.
Graziella, how about you? What's your experience so far?
Yeah, this experience is slightly different in the sense that it was very positive so far. We've been actually having a different approach from some of the mainstream on attention. We've been using as an input to our media planning rather than aiming for attention as an output and our main KPI or the success of our campaigns. So we've been looking at the way, which type of attention we actually need to engage to our audience, whether we are looking at a brand building exercise. So we are aiming for having a media plan that can reach channels that can activate active attention rather than passive attention, versus when it's something that is a less brand building exercise, is more product related. They are already our customer, they are already engaged with us. We can also have attention metrics as an input in our media planning for those channels where we can only use passive attention, for instance.
So for the people who've been on in the audience so far, an awful lot of the attention metrics that people have been talking about here have been primarily digital attention metrics, thinking about how you optimize programmatic buying or so. What you're talking about here is a far broader vision of attention within planning tools, looking at how attention differs between cinema and TV and radio, and is that right? A much broader...
Well, the intention is that one. Obviously, the industry is still not giving us much around non-digital channels and how you can use and leverage attention to maximize your effectiveness through those multi-channels campaign. But we've been working with OMG and we amplified intelligence to trying to readjust our reach curve in order to consider attention as an input in our media planning. Good. To me, it's where we should go for.
Yeah.
We should have a more holistic approach around attention in media planning rather than just so be focused and narrowing down in each digital channel.
Yeah. And we've had Playground. I mean, obviously I'm from Lumen. We've got Playground here. Graziella just mentioned a company called Amplified Intelligence, run by Karen Nelson-Fields, who you may know, who another leading attention technology company, and one that we respect a great deal. I wanted to say that up front, because I really do think that Amplified's data is very strong and very useful, because I want to ask a slightly more sort of controversial question, which is, what are the problems with the current attention debate? I mean, this is not a comment on Amplified Intelligence, because they're very good. But you know, Chris, you were saying that you've yet to be convinced by this, and Graziella, you were saying you've been using this for planning, but not for other things. Should we start with you, Graziella? What are the problems that you see with using this data?
Well, the first one I just mentioned, it's just narrowing down into a part of our media planning. So we do have now some evidence around the digital channels, but we don't do only digital channels. Particularly when we do any activities around brand building, where attention can play a very key role, we need to have a more substantial evidence around brand building activities outside digital channels. Second, and that is, I think, is the point in common that I have with Chris, is measurement is not that yet. Not measurement in terms of having a KPI that is agreed, but it's about the pure measurement, how much has been contributing, not only the attribution to attention and how this has been delivering, but how much has been contributing to the ultimate KPI that we have, which is not only catching attention, it's also, and in particularly, because that is the CMO and the CFO language, how much sales has been delivered. That is, to me, the big missing point. And then a third area, and I'll stop here, is around the long-term effect of attention. So once we get the media planning that is set up for the attention, active, passive, whatever it is, and so on. So for this campaign works, but what about the others? What about consistently across the years? What it means sustain attention in the long term?
And sustained as in sustained over days and weeks and months rather than 1 second, 2 second, 3 second. Is that
indeed?
Very good. So Chris, you know, you've been at the attention stage before. You've heard everyone. You've had your agencies pitch this to you. Why haven't you bitten?
I just don't think it's that revolutionary. Yeah, to say that a 30-second TVC is going to drive loads more attention than a display ad on the Daily Mail or something like that, like, seems pretty obvious. And I don't feel like... It's quite distracting. I don't feel like it's that far away from traditional media planning and buying principles. I also think that, particularly in the UK market, and it's important to recognise that we are a UK-only brand and brands, and so that's kind of where we play. And I get that in other markets, perhaps where offline measurement isn't as sophisticated and so on, that it might be more valuable. But it just doesn't, so far, it doesn't seem that revolutionary to everything that we're doing. And the evidence that at least I've been being given by our agencies and partners isn't that strong, I don't think. Like, what I haven't seen is a really, really solid, well-designed, structured experiment where you've got traditional media buying principles, whatever they are, in 50% of wherever it is, probably the US, and attention-specific sort of buying approaches in the other half, and then comparing results over months, at least, maybe even a year or so. And I think once that stuff starts coming out, then I have more impetus to kind of push for it. But at the moment, yeah, not convinced.
So what's interesting about it, there's sometimes people get on stage here and glory in the fact that this is all so obvious. Big ads get more attention than little ads. Video ads tend to get more attention than static ads and stuff like that. And for people who work in the attention industry, the fact that it is so intuitive and makes sense is very reassuring. But from your point of view, Chris, you've spent a long time learning something that we already knew.
Well, that's kind of how it feels, yeah. Like, I also, in the nature of what myself and Graziella do, like, we're all about measurement. And if you really want to understand whether a channel is particularly better or an execution is particularly better than another execution, then I think it was Nikos who was here earlier from TUI gave you all the tools there on one slide that you should be using to do that. That should be what's informing your media plan, like lift testing, your econometrics, your attribution models, and so on. And while I'm totally for the principles that high attention media should be what we buy, that kind of feels like what we've been doing. And I suppose the only benefit of it, in the sense that in a world where it's really easy to buy a bunch of digital display ads via whoever, Google Ads or Meta or whatever, it's a way to combat that. And I'm very much in favor of that as an argument for trying to encourage people to look at it in this way. And that's kind of where I think alternative markets outside of the UK and the US starts to become a bigger thing, because it's much harder to measure out of home in like Turkey, for instance, than it would be here, where we've got some more developed approaches that we can use. They're great, but it just seems very obvious to me.
So Graziella.
I don't disagree, but it's the research side of me. When I joined marketing, was one of the things that I look at was attention, getting everything from the academia and see if it was possible to apply marketing. And the comment was, that is academia, we don't do that. We are obviously aiming for attention, so why we should spend time on it? And today we are in attention stage, talking about this. So I'm always doing these examples. Every time I got an opinion around attention, I always make that example. That was more than like 10 years ago. No one was giving attention to attention whatsoever. And today everybody's in a rush for attention. I don't disagree with you. It's like, that is the obvious. Once we don't know the long term, I don't even bother to change anything. But we need to start from somewhere. So today we have an isolation campaign test. We need to push the agencies to give us a proper plan. So what is the plan for the future? If I do this test today, then I need to replicate again and again and again and again. And then in a year time, in 2 years' time, I will know whether attention is worth it or not. And from my point of view, and from what I have seen working for HSBC in particular, is this idea of choosing careful what you want to do with attention is an input. And when it's an input, it's a weighting system in your reach curve, or is just a channel selection in principle, or you want to do a brand building activity, so you just want to sell one specific card versus another one. And that is where the agency needs to work with the brand. We cannot be just us pushing the agency, it should be the agency pushing our media plan to have a proper action and a proper idea of how attention should be tested in the long term.
So this is very inspiring. So let's workshop this then. Now we've got, so what evidence do you need to go on this attention journey to work out if it's valuable or not? I mean, lots of people in the audience here will be in exactly your position to say, I need to move from single A/B tests where the bar was low and now the bar is high and therefore this worked. What sort of activities and what sort of roadmap would you lay out? Where would you start and where would you like to finish? Graziella, do you want to start?
Well, one of the things that I would like to see, particularly from the agency towards us, is HSBC cover a lot of different markets. He already mentioned that we need to have a consistent test across the markets and see that. One of the things that I would like to see in how we can complement the existing measurement with the new one where attention is coming in. Can we already, are we already in a position that we can take all the data around attention and media planning through attention and ingest, for instance, in our econometric modeling, in our MMM, budget setting solution and so on? Is that possible in a consistent way? As I said, I don't particularly believe in the one-off thing. I want to have data structured in a way that is possible for us to consistently use in the measurement. That is something that I don't really see that is offered that consistently across all the companies at the agency that talks around attention. And my worry is that we are treating attention as we treat viewability in the past. Everybody was rushing for it, but then turns out viewability doesn't even correlate, not even cause anything, but it doesn't even correlate with anything. So, and I'm very worried that we are in a rush with attention, and then turns out that we are treating in the exactly way as we do with viewability.
How about you, Chris? If you were going to put together a program to work out if this is worthwhile, what would phase 1 be? What would phase 2? What would phase 3 be?
I think I'd like to see some kind of big meta-analysis done by one of maybe a combination of the major kind of effectiveness consultancies, similar to what ThinkBox did recently with Profitability 2 and Profitability 1 6 years ago or whatever. Something like that, where a relatively independent source within the industry has kind of gone around and picked out the studies and the research and the evidence that looks genuinely good. They can put their brand behind it. And that kind of gives it a starting point and some recommendations of where to begin. I think ultimately, though, it goes back to the geo-experiment kind of process or mixed market or whatever it is you want to do. And it needs to be done by multiple brands over a long period of time. HSBC are probably a pretty good example of that. But like a McDonald's in the US, for instance, it's probably got to be in the US just because of the footprint and how the DMAs work and so on. The geo-targeting in the UK is okay, but the decent-sized regions with decent population density, there are only a few. There's like 4, basically. So I'd say it's probably in the US.
This is quite a high bar that you're putting on the companies to do. Do you think... Because what you're sort of saying is that until such time as it has been absolutely sort of randomized control study being proven, then it's not worth touching at all.
Not at all. But what I'm saying is, to me at least, and I'm sure there are many people in my company who disagree.
This is why we've got you on the screen, on the stage.
To be clear, I'm not skeptical about the principles. I totally agree with the principles. I think it's all perfectly reasonable, and I actually really like, and I'm going to steal the reach curve idea from Graziella, so thank you for that. Guy on my team, Josh, is in the audience. I'm hoping he's made note. But I just don't think it's revolutionary. I think it's actually the cornerstone of good media planning is most of what comes out of it, and I think it's good evidence for that. But do I think it's the way to drive that forward? And that's why I think it has a higher bar than other things, because it's expensive to buy this kind of data and to run these studies. And you're talking about quite a dramatic change to how the agency, I just finished doing IPA Effectiveness Awards judging. And of the 40 that I did, 1 had actually used attention data in their media planning in a meaningful way. So it's not that prolific. And I'm sure people like yourself and the other guys that you mentioned earlier, it's a fantastic product. I don't deny it is. And to evidence it is great. But to change completely the way you're doing your media strategy from your day-to-day incremental improvements that you're doing all the time with people like myself or Graziella's teams and the wider effectiveness community, I think requires a high bar to justify it. And I think it is very easy to do in practice. I know it sounds big, but like splitting up your markets into 50% we're going to plan this way and 50% you're going to plan that way, like particularly in the US with a population of 300-something million, for a brand like a McDonald's or a PepsiCo or something like that, where you have the scale, I don't think it would actually be that difficult to do. And then you just track them and you see which one does better.
It's interesting.
We're not there because everything is based on digital channels.
Sorry?
We are not there because everything is based on digital channels. How we can even split half and half of our investment in one market?
But perhaps, Graziella, there's an approach...
No, we can.
No, but
how much do you do just 100% on digital channels? Then you can split half of your digital channels goes into attention, half doesn't use attention.
But that's completely possible to do with a decent-sized budget. Like, you split brand and trading, right? But it's the same principle.
But to your point, Chris, it's a risky thing to do. And it's a brave marketer who would put half their budget against a media planning philosophy that they didn't really believe in there. But I mean, I wonder if there might be other ways. I mean, Lumen works with Ubiquity, and they have massive historic data sets, which allows you to do that historical analysis there. And then presumably as well, you guys have very well-worked econometric models. Those models will have factors in them, a media spend factor. it wouldn't be impossible to add in attention data principles into that to see if that reduces the error in the models. If the models predict outcomes better when you include this attention data as a factor, that would be one way, or without spending any money and without putting any money at risk, of perhaps demonstrating the sort of the potential economic value of this sort of stuff. Are there any other things that you'd really like to see you've talked about big meta-analyses, you've talked about geographical splits. Are there any other ways in which you can think in which companies who are interested in optimizing to attention could actually do something useful rather than just talk about it?
I think one other way that I personally would be interested, because we are not doing yet at HSBC, is about the contextual advertising. So how much attention is a way for us to also assess the performance and the effectiveness of our creative. It's not only an input to our media planning, so channel selection or the reach curve or which exercise we want to do. I think the creative side is where I still feel like we have started. I have seen something, but as a brand, we didn't do yet. So that is where my personal interest will go in to see whether these enhance the creative as an input again. I agree with him when he says that it's not that revolutionary because it's a common sense. Is finally there, so I'm very happy, and I want to push that everybody should use in the proper way. But if it's an input to assess our creative, I think it will be very, very useful.
Yeah. So adding in extra dimensions like creativity, to understand how creative can give you an unfair share of attention is an important extra factor there. We've had lots of talks from often using Lumen data, sometimes using playground data to really understand the impact of creative and building. But Chris, what else? What other things do you need, or where do you think the industry needs to go next to be able to isolate those extra variables?
Yeah, well, I think the creative angle is actually a really good one. There's been a lot of eye tracking and all sorts of stuff that's existed in the market for ages, and we've done it, and I'm sure HSBC have done it, and most brands have dipped their toe to one way or another. And like that, totally all for it. See the value in where people's eye are drawn when you're watching the ad. Was it conceptual closure, is that what it's called, or whatever it is, when people stop paying attention, basically.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff is fantastic, and I think Kantar here, what I'd like to see if you were going to go down that route is combine what you do have, or what the attention industry has, I should say. Sorry, not you specifically. Mike.
No. Other providers,
yeah.
just as other MPs are available. And you can get a full list from the BBC website.
But you could
similarly, there are other attention providers as well.
But you could feasibly match recognition scores from various Kantar tracked campaigns with your attention metrics. And if you do it over enough campaigns over a long period of time, controlling for various other bits and pieces that you would need to, then you could get a decent view of whether attention drives recognition. And recognition is highly correlated with ROI, right? So provided you account for media investment, that would be a probably fairly easy way to get to a number.
You'll be excited, and if you stick around for other parts of the conference, because we'll be talking about exactly those sorts of things.
Super.
I think we're coming to time. Thank you so much for raising the bar on what counts as evidence here. I'm really grateful. I think we've got a number of themes that come out of this about going beyond digital media and individual digital tests to think about the breadth of all the media you're doing, thinking about how those things interact, and not just doing A/B tests, but thinking about the breadth of it, and definitely linking that to econometrics, and staying skeptical. I think that it's a skill in a conference like this, when lots of people are going to be selling stuff to you, to say, where's the evidence for this? How does that actually work? How does it fit with everything else I know about marketing? Guys, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that we can give you the evidence you need and work with you in more ways to convince you in the future. Thanks very much, guys.